Good morning. Welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personality, politicians, and perspectives. Golly sakes, is just sitting there having a cup of coffee and didn't even look at the clock. Mr. Ash waving frantically at me here. Get on the air, Bill. Good morning, Mrs. Busby.
And good morning to yourself.
Well, I always try to start with a kudo.
Yes.
And I think that's going to make this an in-house kudo here that involves our guest this morning. And you'll introduce the gentleman shortly, if you can remember his name.
Me and
I
Joe
hope so.
This gentleman serves in our legislature down there in Springfield. And, those fellows, those rascals down there, engineered a raise for themselves. And Mr. Butler decided that he wasn't going to participate in that. So what he does with his raise, and I think this is worthy of note, the raise that he got as a legislator passes through his hands and goes to charity. And I think that that's worthy of note. And so that'll be my kudo this morning, Mrs. Busby.
I think that's a good one.
Now, why
and
don't you
congratulations on that good idea
Thank you.
had, Tim. What
It'll
percentage
it'll
of
probably go to a combination of my alma mater, Eastern Illinois University.
Good.
Which I have a phone call scheduled with the football coach. He just reached out to me the other day.
Does he
me up
want
for a
you to
little money.
play?
Yeah, I'm sure he would hit me up for a little money. And then we are big fans of the Animal Protective League in Springfield as well.
Yes.
We have two little kitties at home that came from the APL, and it's not far from our place, and we try to be pretty supportive of the APL.
Let's get a
as well.
formal introduction to this fellow. Somebody might think we brought somebody in from, God forbid, Cook County. Well, they wouldn't do that. Anybody from there wouldn't do what Tim's done. So go ahead.
Is that the end of your commentary?
I'll shut up.
Do you want them to secede from our union?
Yeah, that'd be fine with me.
Well, our friend Tim Butler is with us today, so any questions that you may have for the representative of the 47th District.
87th.
87th District of the, I'm stuck on 40. Joe Biden and I get confused.
She just swore on the air. Don't shut her off.
Well, at any rate, here we are. So if you have any questions for Mr. Butler, please give us a call. Give us the number, Bill.
648-5510. You thought I'd forgotten.
Yeah, see, well, that was a test.
It was a mental test. That's what it was.
That's what it was.
Make sure you're awake.
Get both of them to call in at the same time. We're in trouble.
Well, it says in the State Journal-Register this morning that the Americans are the unhappiest that they've been in years. You want to give us your take on that?
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet, but, it certainly doesn't surprise me if you go out and you do a poll with everything that's going on in the last few months between the coronavirus and now what's happened in the wake of George Floyd's deaths and all the protests around the country. And then if you go in the field and do a poll, people probably aren't very happy and uneasy about things. And I guess it's understandable. It's unfortunate in the fact that, our economy was doing pretty good until a few months ago when the virus hit.
Well, but just now the market has kind of responded to the fact that life may go on.
Yeah.
So let's hope that continues.
Yeah, I think it's going to be. I think the recovery from what has happened from the shutdown, the economic shutdown that we've seen, especially in places like Illinois, it's going to take a long time to recover from that, especially when you look at industries like the hospitality industry, the hotel industry, which is, there's no occupancy whatsoever in hotels around the country. The restaurant industry, which we're struggling to get places back open again, and I think it's going to take a long time for people, number one, to be comfortable, and number two, to get this back up and going again.
I think it's impacted a lot of people. Excuse me, go ahead.
Well, one of us has to.
Well, you own 51% of the show, so go ahead.
Now I forgot where I was.
Well, while you're working on that, I'm just going to make a comment. This economic impact, it's impacted me and a lot of people like myself. I've become a better tipper.
Absolutely.
Because I understand that things have changed markedly for some folks out there in the service industries, and it doesn't bother me a little bit to throw another $5 in there.
I actually, Wendy and I went down to St. Louis yesterday. We took a little day, and first time we've been out of state, maybe all year, and went down to St. Louis and did a little shopping and toured around and drove through Forest Park, and then ended up having something to eat in Webster Groves, and I left a little extra for the guy, and he actually yelled out to me as we were walking through the parking lot, thanked me for the extra on the tip, and that's I think a lot of people are thinking about that.
Those folks have been impacted to a severe degree in some cases, and so I think we need to remember that. And so those of you who do get out to eat once in a while, leave them a couple extra bucks. Well, they'll appreciate it. Tell them old Bill said hi.
There you go. Speaking of money, let's talk a little bit about that. We're considered one of the high tax states, okay? However, our legislature seems to be in dire straits as far as money is concerned. How do you equate that? You know, it just seems that, like, we private people, we have to figure out how much money we have coming in, and then we figure out what to do with it. We don't just dream dreams and smoke funny cigarettes or whatever, and then hope we get some real pregnant idea about how to spend money. How do you do it down there?
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that we were really frustrated with this spring when the legislature went back into session a few weeks ago at the end of May. Was the fact that, number one, I thought so in the state we have to have our budget in place by July 1. The fiscal year begins July 1. And I thought we should wait into June to get a better handle on where we were at from the revenue projections for the state, to find out, there's been a crash in revenue because of the economic shutdown. And I thought we should have waited until later this month to pass a budget so we get a better handle. That's not what the Speaker and the Democrats decided to do. The budget we passed, and I didn't vote for it, but we as the legislature passed onto the governor, is the largest budget in Illinois history, which is kind of amazing, thinking that.
And whence cometh the money?
At this time, it's a $42 billion budget that relies on potentially $5 billion in borrowing from the Federal Reserve, an unprecedented opportunity that can take place, but we're asking for the feds to help us out for $5 billion of that $42 billion.
And the
so that tells you
that?
I forget what they pegged the interest at that one. It's better than going into the market to do it, but obviously we're going to have to pay interest on it back to the Fed.
They don't just hand that to you and say happy birthday.
And so I think this is, the revenues that we have in Illinois are based off of the income tax that comes in to the door, which is currently 4.95% in Illinois for the income tax. We've got sales taxes, which come into the state of Illinois. You have other revenue sources through gaming, and of course the gaming revenue has just gone completely by the boards as the casinos have shut down and the video gaming is shut down. So we've seen a big drop in revenue. And so yes, across the board, when you figure in then property taxes on top of that, which go to local governments, not the state government, local sales taxes and things like that, when you look at the overall burden on Illinoisans, we have one of the highest tax rates in the country, and a lot of people wonder why we can't manage our budget when we have one of the largest tax rates across the board in the country. And I mean, the fact of the matter is, at a time like this, when we know that we've had huge drops in revenue coming in the door, if that's not a time to take a look at holding the line on spending, which we basically didn't do this year, then something's seriously wrong. That if you can't find ways to cut now to balance with what you've got coming in the door, you're never gonna do it.
A new form of revenue for the sovereign state of Illinois is realized from marijuana. We've got a plant just down the road here, a couple blocks. That's a dandy. Now, how is that doing for the state? Are they realizing from that the kind of money they figured they would?
So the revenue that I've seen, so we've had it started January 1, so January, February, March, April. I'm trying to remember if we've seen that. I don't think we've seen the May numbers yet for revenue. I think the April numbers it was $44 million in revenue, tax revenue that came in, and it has from a revenue projection perspective. I think it's done what they were looking at it to do, and that all that money goes into the general revenue fund. It doesn't get
Not marked.
It doesn't go to transportation or something like that. It goes into the general. Revenue. So I mean that has been a source of revenue that has been something we didn't have previously. I think it's to be determined what the social costs of legalization are going to be when you drive by the shop in downtown Springfield, or when we drove by. There's the one right off the interstate in Collinsville that we drove by yesterday. We went down to St. Louis. There's usually a line waiting to get in the door at the dispensaries. So I think somehow the demand is there, but the revenue is something that that we didn't have in previous years, which helps a little bit, but it's not a panacea for everything, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Before I stroke him for being a good representative for his district, which is the 87th district, made up of 4 counties, and we perhaps might have a call now. Hopefully that will be a call. I was just getting ready to urge our listeners, both of our listeners, we have a call for Mr. Butler. Go, put your headset on, Tim. We'll find out what we. Okay. Go right ahead, caller.
Hi, Representative Tim. This is Marilyn Wheat.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks, Marilyn.
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you that our Humane Society is still going, and so you can stop by sometime.
That's a great facility. I was happy to be able to tour the Humane Society a year or so ago, and they do a great job in Logan County, and to
volunteers again.
and to help out as one of the celebrity bartenders last year at their little fundraiser they did at Spirited Republic. Even though Darren Powell did better than me on that night, so
yeah, he shorted me 3 times on my drinks.
Yeah,
We appreciate your call. And we also want to throw a good word in for the Humane Society out there. You've got some great folks that are dedicated, and thank goodness we have those volunteers, because it's a tough job you do out there.
Well, Representative does a great job at what he's doing. But
Thank
I wanted
you.
to tell him we're going to have another Pints for Paws August 20th. So put that on your
all right,
calendar.
we'll put it on the schedule.
Okay.
Thank
Well, you have
Bye-bye.
a great day.
Thanks,
And
Marilyn.
thanks for your support
That's
for
what I
us.
call Wheaties.
Absolutely.
Yeah. They were our guests last
Take
week.
care. They were your guest
Butler.
last week?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, very good.
Hey, she and Danny, they work hard out there.
Yes, they
It's
do.
a great facility. I
It is a
I
very
toured
nice
there. It
facility.
was about a little over a year ago, and it was. I think they wondered why I wanted to go see the Humane Society, and when I showed them photos of my 2 cats, they understood why. So
Well, until I decided to go to Camp Butler, which was not named after Tim Butler.
not in the least.
I was going to go to the Humane Society.
Not in the least.
Tim, 4 counties. That's a pretty good sized district. Mr. Butler does a good job. I'm not trying to stroke him because he's sitting here and agreed to come up here. We needed a guest today, and I thought of Tim because he hadn't been with us in a while. And once again, his schedule was clear, and he graciously decided that he could do that for us, which is what he does in the 87th district. Note that, Judith, 407.
Yes.
What are your comments that you'll get from your constituents as you go? But we're a conservative district, obviously, so we're that part of the country. Thank God that folks act pretty civil. What are some of the main comments that fall on your shoulders, Tim?
I think right now it has so much to do with COVID and the pandemic, and either the health concerns, the villas, which was the long-term care facility in Sherman, is in the district that I represent, which is we've seen 25 deaths, I think it was, that came out of the villas of our 33 deaths that we've had in Sangamon County. So that's been a real tragedy to see, and I think people are concerned about the health aspect of it, but they're also concerned about the economic impact that, like we were talking about earlier, and that I hear that time and time again, and it runs the gamut. I hear from all sorts of business owners who are concerned. I was actually out at the state fairgrounds yesterday, and the governor announced the cancellation of the state fair last week. I was out at the state fairgrounds yesterday talking to one of the local vendors about, hey, is there something we can do to encourage, to do something to get set up at the fair, and try to encourage some of the local vendors to get set up. So much from the community on the concerns over the economic impact, and a lot of people are concerned about the fact that their rights of being able to live their lives, and that's a big concern for a lot of people.
This business of having 2 pretty good-sized prisons in our county was something I thought about a lot, because you have a confined population, and if something like that got going in one of those, it'd be Katie bar the door. And our hats off to the prison officials who managed to make their rules in such a way that it didn't happen, because that would be multiplying the awfulness that's happened in the nursing homes.
Yeah, it's the Department of Corrections has really tried to stay on top of this throughout the state of Illinois, and they know that the potential for quick spread of COVID exists in our prisons in Illinois. And there was just the East Moline Correctional Facility was just announced the other day. There was 23 cases that just got announced the other day. So you hope that you can keep it contained.
Yeah.
And Department of Corrections have worked very hard to do that.
Now, further on that business, we go into phase 4 here momentarily.
I keep my fingers crossed on that.
Okay, well, with your fingers crossed, tell us your position. Do you think we've gone too quickly? Do you think we've gone too slow?
Oh, I think
we'll give you time to contemplate that question, because we have phase 5, and that is recognize. We have recognized our sponsors. So go right ahead, Mr. Rash. Right back live in the studios here of WLCN 96.3 high on the 2250 County Road out there. Our guest this morning, Mr. Tim Butler, representative of the 87th Legislative District. I've said it before, and I'm going to say it again because I don't mind. It's ad nauseum as far as some people are concerned, and that's okay. Tim is one of those who gives us a buck for the buck we spend. For instance, foregoing his raise and giving that raise to charity, that's certainly an outstanding example of service. Moreover, if you need something and you have a question, he'll answer you. And that's his job. That's why we sent him down there. That's why we voted for him. So you don't. It
might take me a while to get to the answer sometimes, but I am a politician,
you know. Yes, well, you're a politician. That doesn't make you a bad person. In some cases, that makes some people a real bad person. So 648-5510. If anybody has a question and or comments for Representative Butler, please feel free to call. You can blindside him if you want. He'll be cordial. I'm going to blindside him right now. State budget of $42 billion, you say, and out of that money we can't find any money at all, not even $5.68 to do anything about the shuttered Lincoln Developmental Center. Any talk down there in Springfield?
Well, there's always a fair amount of talk about LDC, and I think it's a point of frustration for many of us in the legislature who represent facilities that have been shuttered, because we're not alone with LDC. You got Jacksonville Developmental Center that's in the same situation over in Jacksonville, a similar community to Lincoln size-wise and things like that. You have other facilities across the state, and this is we make it very difficult to offload state property. You have to get 3 appraisals on the property. You have to go through all this legwork to get rid rid of state property. Then you have to make it, it has to go to local governments first or other governmental bodies first and things like that. And we make it very difficult. And then on top of that, you have a facility like that we have no remediation fund when something like that shuts down. And so, we do that for other businesses, make them put into a kitty for their businesses in case they do shut down. We do it for the utility industry a lot, where in case they have to shut down, you have the remediation for it. I mean, when you look at LDC, and I drive by LDC, I just drove by it today. You drive by LDC all the time. There's no way many of those buildings can be habitable at this point. They need to be raised. They need to come down. You need to clear the property. Now, the newer facilities, the newer group homes that were built under Blagojevich, which are still in pretty good shape. I've been in there several times, and they do get used as housing there's some state housing that gets done in there for some of the tactical teams that do training out there, and some of the, I think state police has some people that are housed out there and things like that. There's been a lot of discussions since I've been in about potential uses for those facilities, and including our friend Joe Shaler trying to get something done with the Veterans Assistance Commission out there. But again, it's LDC is a great example of how difficult and how unwieldy it is to try to get things done with the state of Illinois. And I just my own personal opinion is until we raise a large part of that and make it flat ground that you can then hopefully market somehow, it's going to be hard to get something done out there. And it's unfortunate.
It's so there.
Yep.
I mean, you drive by and you think, oofta.
Yeah. Well, I've suggested that the Illinois the film board can do some horror films out there in some of those facilities.
Good old Frankenstein film.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
Mr. Butler, with your confreres in the legislature, is there anything that would approach collegiality in the definition of that word as you sit with one another and meet?
I think there's a lot more that goes on to that than people think.
Because that's the only way you get things done.
Yeah, it's absolutely the only way you get things done. And I think those of us who serve in minority parties, and I don't care, across the country in legislatures, if you're in the Democrat and you're in the minority, if you're a Republican, you're in the minority, you have to go the step further to make friends and figure out how to do things for your district because you're in the minority, because you don't have the votes and things like that. So, I pride myself on trying to have good relationships across the aisle. Some of the best friends that I've made in the General Assembly are people from the north side of Chicago who are, philosophically very different than me, but they're good people because they're good people. I mean, you know good people when you see them. And so I think that happens more than you think. And in today's day and age, with social media and everything, it's so easy for people to say something or just see one side of an issue but I think the heart of our process, our legislative process in this country is deliberation and collaboration, and that's how you get things done. There's 177. It takes 60 votes in the House. It takes 30 votes in the Senate, and it takes the governor to sign a piece of legislation. So that's 91 people you have to have on your side to get something done. And if you don't know how to collaborate, you're never gonna get anything done.
Well, this business of, he's a Democrat or he's a Republican, that's just a lot of BS. Just because you wear one hat or the other doesn't make you a good or a bad guy.
Yep.
Now I've gone to that end of that curtain many times and voted for Democrats, and I'm very happy that I have done that. Because I felt at that time, Democrat or Republican, if I voted for the Democrat, I felt that he was better than the other candidate. And that's the way this system's supposed to work.
You voted for Thomas Jefferson, right?
He ran his campaign locally.
Cut his check. Right? He just lost his appearance fee. No, I was totally pushed aside and started to vote for Tom, so I never did get to vote.
Oh, dear heaven.
But seriously, we had a gentleman here who ran for appellate bench. Bright man, really bright man. Campaigning as such, in that sense of the word, was just anathema to him. it just didn't sit well with him. And I would go door to door in DeWitt County for him, knocking on doors trying to get a vote for a Democrat. And I was proud to do so because I felt that he was the right guy. That's the way it ought to be in this system.
Yeah, when you look at our municipal governments in Illinois, largely our municipal governments are nonpartisan positions, and that a lot of times where people sit, philosophically in nonpartisan positions, but nonpartisan positions do create a different dynamic, and I think a more cooperative dynamic when you don't have the party label behind you in these positions. So Nebraska, I think Nebraska is the only legislature in the country that does not elect legislators by party. They're nonpartisan positions, and I think there could be something to be said for that, because it does. I guarantee you, Mike Madigan wouldn't be speaker right now if we had a nonpartisan legislature. He wouldn't, And I think I do think as we move forward in these changing times. Those are the kind of things I think we got to think about. Is where what is the role of the parties these days? How does it impact public policy? How does it impact us, as elected officials dealing with each other and everything? And I think those are good conversations to have, at least.
Nothing will happen good for our state with a continued us versus them mentality.
No.
And
it's Republican, Democrat. It's Chicago versus downstate versus the suburb. I mean, we're one state of 13 million people, and we got to figure out how to. And we're a very diverse state from top to bottom. I mean, it really is. Cairo is not Rockford, and and I think that's one of the beauties of the state as well.
Well, the folks down in Cobden, Illinois.
Apple Knocker, aren't they the Apple Knockers?
Those are the Apple Knockers.
Yeah, there you go.
They were a big state tournament one time.
Yes.
It was a big time. I think that was my time in high school, which was a long time ago.
Were we going to talk about the phases before the break?
Were.
Yeah.
So number 4 begins here post haste.
So number 4, so we're in phase 3 currently, which allows for outdoor dining, salons and barbershops have opened with restrictions. Just
this morning, they were lamenting the fact that you could only have up to 50 people in a crowd. So the next phase, people were mad about that.
So the next phase, which should go into effect at the end of June, so still a couple weeks away, would allow for gatherings of up to 50 people, would allow for indoor dining under restrictions, social distancing restrictions and things like that. And I think, look, the region that we all live in, that the governor set up these 4 regions, the region that we live in, the central region, 1.8 million people from border to border, from Indiana to Iowa, and we've had 109 deaths out of 1.8 million people. Our positivity rate, so that's when you test positive after you've had a test, our positivity rate is 1.5%. And as I told you guys off air, we have, for the first time in a while, we have 0 people in the hospital in Springfield. So Springfield's obviously one of the main, health centers for this region. We have 0 people in the hospital. We have, and we're far below the other regions. Our deaths are half of the next closest region in Illinois, and that's been my frustration with the governor, is that his plan doesn't deal with what actually is going on the ground.
In what respect, Tim,
well,
please?
I mean, we have met the targets, the metrics that he has set up the entire time that he has had this set up. I mean, we should have been in the next phase a month ago, but that's not how it got set up. A lot of states are going to 2-week phases instead of 4-week phases. So, we could be transitioning this week potentially into phase 4 instead of waiting another 2 weeks for phase 4 as well. And then beyond phase 4, there's nothing. Phase 5 is basically having a vaccine. So we're gonna be in phase 4 for a long time, until the governor decides that we're in a place where everybody can go like it, how we were before.
And what comes Mr. Pritzker's authority? I mean, other than being the governor, where does he get his information?
Well, and that's another point of frustration and lawsuits as well. Is that the governor has the authority under the Emergency Management Act is what he has to declare emergencies in the state of Illinois for up to 30 days, but there's no limit on the number of consecutive orders that he can issue, and so that's where he's said that he has the power to be able to continue ordering these 30-day executive powers. And when you read the Emergency Management Act, he has pretty broad powers to do things. I think some of that is limited, that we haven't challenged enough. I mean, that just like the state fair is one example where by law we shall have a state fair. That's what it says. We shall have a state fair. I don't think the governor has the authority, even under his executive authority, to negate a state law. That's a state law that's on the books. And I granted that's the state fair. It's not exactly life or death, but it's still a state law, and it's a big deal. And I think the governor has exceeded his authority in a lot of areas on things.
648-5510. Our guest this morning, Mr. Tim Butler, your representative in Springfield. As I said before, ad nausea, does a good job for you. 648-5510. If you have any questions, comments, and you don't even have to be nice to him if you don't want to. I try to him because he's bigger than I am. But anyway, he'd be happy to field any questions for you. When you first decided to run for office, Tim, did you have a noble objective of such, and then you watched that kind of wash down the creek?
Well, luckily, given my background working for members of Congress, working for Ray LaHood, working for Rodney Davis, I think it gave me a good perspective on public service and knowing that you can do good things for the communities that you represent. I enjoy this job a lot. I really do. Even in these,
that's evident.
Even in these crazy times, this is the best job I've ever had. It really is. I enjoy it. I have fun with it, which probably isn't a lot of things that gets correlated with being in politics, having fun with it. But it is. I mean, I enjoy the ability to be able to impact the policies of the state of Illinois. I think that's, to be able to legislate is a big honor. But more than that, being able to impact the communities that you represent and trying to get things done for them, and whether that's trying to provide funding for projects that they have, whether that's helping people out who might have an issue with the state of Illinois, or whether that's just being a voice for your communities, and letting people know how important this area of the state is. And that's all stuff that I think is the reason you get into elected position, is to do those type of things for the communities you represent.
Do you ever get irate phone calls? Is someone blaming you for things that you couldn't possibly be responsible for?
There's a lot of confusion, and rightly so, on who does what as far as your elected officials go. I get confused sometimes on what the right level of government is you're supposed to kind of. So, we get phone calls blaming me for something that happened in D.C., and I'll be, call your congressman, or, hey, my trash didn't get picked up. Well, call your alderman, there's a fair amount of that. But there's also a fair amount of people getting upset with things that I do have control over as an elected official in the state of Illinois. Oh yeah, that's part of the job. You get the pats on the back, and you get the knocks upside the head too. So
yeah,
it's part of it.
Yeah.
Do you ever wander into a coffee group in some place or another, just kind of unannounced and unattended?
That's one of the things I really enjoy doing is going around the district and stopping in to see people, whether it's going into see somebody in a restaurant or having coffee or popping in somewhere, and that's obviously not doing hardly doing any of that right now as we have,
because of this COVID
which has been one of the frustrations in being an elected official, is that you really can't get out and about a whole lot. But yeah, that's a great part of the job. Sometimes we'll set up events. We'll set up a coffee or a town meeting to have people in. Sometimes we'll stop in and just see people. I was in Tremont a few days ago, late last week, and sat down with the retiring school superintendent in Tremont and had a cup of coffee at the coffee shop outside. And you had we talked to 25, 30 people as they came in and out of the store, which is always a fun thing to do. And I think that's another part of the job that I really enjoy. It just, that's how I stay up on a lot of the, issues that are going on in the district.
Well, and I'm sure that as you talk to 25 people at a gathering, you get some ideas that are pretty valid.
Yeah. I think people might be surprised how much of the discussions that they have with their elected officials might impact either how they take action on things or ideas that come up. I've introduced legislation because of conversations that I've had with people in my district, and that's how the process is supposed to work, and it's a good thing.
I always thought if you really want to touch grassroots, you'd stop it in some country elevator somewhere about 6:30 in the morning or 7 o'clock, because that's where they're all gathered for a little cup of coffee, and then they go about their business.
Yep.
And you can sit right down in a group of...
Those guys won't be afraid to give you an earful either.
No.
Well, they sit on the tractor all day and think about it,
Exactly.
Is there one particular angst that you have, sir, as you service?
Well,
has to be a lot of those in that category.
Yeah, I do. I think like a lot of people, I worry about the direction of our state. I worry about the loss of population that we have and why that has happened. It's not just one thing. I mean, there's some big things that we can point to, the tax structure and things like that. We can't do anything about the weather. Well, maybe climate change will do it for us, and we'll have palm trees on Lake Michigan here, in the next millennium or something like that. But
that'll change your picture.
But I do. That concerns me. My mom's side of the family has been in Illinois the entire time that we've been a state, and to think that the state that I have such deep roots in is going in a direction I don't want to see that's the kind of stuff that makes you worried, but it also is one of the reasons why you get involved too.
My angst as a citizen is the nuttiness going on around this country.
Yeah.
The marches and what comes to be a protest march suddenly becomes very vicious, and they start tearing down buildings and burning buildings. You just shake your head and you say, what happened to our country?
Yeah. Well, I think they, luckily things have really gotten under control after those first initial few days when the protests happened after George Floyd's death. But some of the images that I saw around the country were tremendously disturbing. I mean, the one that really got me, and I lived in Washington D.C. for several years after I got out of college, and Lafayette Park, just north of the White House there, when you saw some of those buildings on fire across the street from the White House, as an American, that's a heavy thing to see on TV. And then when I see, a community that my sister lives in, that I've lived in Naperville, where has looters in Naperville one night. I mean, that's it's disturbing things to see. That's for sure.
The selfishness of it all is what gets me. I have an aunt who lives in Minneapolis. She lives on the side of the city where all the burning and looting was done. Not close enough to see the smoke, but that's where her post office, her library. My aunt has her own car. She's 94. She drives over there and does all her grocery shopping and everything. Now, how about people like that? How about a young mother with 3 little kids who now has to take the bus to a grocery store, goodness knows where, haul 3 kids and several bags of groceries? Don't these people think about anybody else?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I've thought a lot about over the last few weeks is how we responded to 9/11. And the thing that a lot of us said over and over again is we're not going to let the terrorists change our lives. We're not going to now. We have changed our lives a little bit. I got to take my shoes off when I fly. But I think you got to have the same attitude on this as well. We're not going to allow people who are trying to tear down our country and riot and loot. We're not going to let them change our life. We got to continue to live our lives. And I think it's unfortunate the rioting and the looting is tremendously unfortunate. And it's really unfortunate in some of the neighborhoods that got hit. The Loop is going to be rebuilt in downtown Chicago. The south and west sides of Chicago, which got hit pretty hard as well, they're going to have a much harder time coming back, and and they need investment too.
The thing we need to remember is you cannot use the word spontaneous when it comes to these organizations and things that happen. Those things just didn't happen to come up like Topsy and grow. They were fomented. So anyway, that's an old man's take on that. Tim Butler, thank you very much for being with us.
You're welcome.
What's the next election for you? I want to
this
start
November, every 2 years. Every 2 years. And you'll get that vote by mail in the mail this year, and we didn't even talk about that. So
yes,
yes, that's exactly what
they got some plans on that too, haven't they?
Well, vote for Tim Butler whenever you're supposed to vote. That's all I can ask you. Tim, thanks for being with us this morning.
It's always a pleasure.
We sign out with Viewpoint with this comment: be the reason somebody smiles every day. Thank you.